We begin at the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Aleph, Zok the Heilige Mishnah, Shnei Kadorim, Shoy Mahalchen Zeh Chazeh. Two potters that are walking in the Rishus Rabim, one is behind the other. V'niskal Arishoin, the first one stumbled and tripped, V'nofal and he fell, and then V'niskal Hasheni B'rishoin. The second one behind him tripped on him and fell. Harishan Chayev B'niskal Sheni. The first one that tripped is going to be responsible for the damages that he causes to the second one that fell and tripped because of him. Okay, so the Gemara will explain what exactly the case of this Mishnah is. Rabbi Yechanan explains, Loi teime masnisen Rab Meiri. You don't have to say that this Mishnah here is following the opinion of Rab Meir. The Omar, Rab Meir says, as we learned before here in this Pedic, that Niskal Pesheyehu, a person that stumbles and there's an accident, but it's considered to be his negligence. And v'chayiv, and therefore he's chayiv for anybody that gets damaged by him. So if we would say that that's the pshat in the Mishnah here, so the first one had an accident and he fell, and therefore he's responsible for the second one behind him that got damaged from him. But if you hold niska laf b'sheya, that if an accident happened, then it's not a level of negligence on your part, so then you shouldn't be responsible for the sheni, for the second one behind you that got damaged. Says Rabbi Yechanan, no. Ela fila Rabbanon the Omri onesu. Even the Rabbanon that say that when it's a niska, when the person tripped and stumbled, it's considered to be an einus or potter, and you potter for the damages that you cause to someone else. But here, hacha in this Mishnah chayiv. Over here, the first one that stumbled and fell is chayiv for the damage that he causes to the second person. Why? What's our Mishnah talking about? Shahoya le'lamoid v'loyamad. That over here, it's talking about that after he fell, he stayed there, and he had time to get up, and he didn't get up. So even if the original fall was the einus, but if he didn't get up after he was able, and he causes damage to the second person, he's chayiv for that. Rav Nachman Yitzchak goes a step further. Even if you're going to say that the fact that he fell is an einus, and it's talking right away before he had a chance to get up, so similarly, he should be potter for any damage that he causes to the second person here. But nevertheless, he'll still be chayiv because because he has to warn. He should be screaming and telling the other person behind him, "Be careful, be careful." So the fact that he didn't warn him, he'll be chayiv for the damage that he causes. Rabbi Yechanan Omar or Omalach, Rabbi Yechanan will tell you that that's not his responsibility to warn the second person. If he just fell and he doesn't even have a chance to pick himself up yet, we don't expect him to be able to warn the Tarit because he just fell and he's absorbed in the fall here, and he doesn't have the chance to get up yet, and he doesn't have the ability to warn yet either. So therefore, he's not going to be responsible for the damages of the other person. Okay, so we have our machlokes whether in a case where a person falls, is he responsible to warn the next person behind him, and if not, he'll be chayiv. Rabbi Yechanan says he does not have to warn, and Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says he does. Tanan, we learned over here in the Mishnah, this is in the next Mishnah, it says, Hoya balkaire rishain. So what the Mishnah there is talking about is, there's a person carrying a beam in the Rishus Rabim, and there's someone else that's carrying a barrel in the Rishus Rabim. So if the case is that Hoya balkaire rishain, the one with the beam is walking first, and then one with the barrel is walking behind him. So if the barrel got broken through this beam, potter. The one with the beam is going to be potter, because the one with the barrel is behind him, and you can see that there's the person with the beam ahead of him, so he has to be careful not to bump into the beam. But vim amad balkaire, however, the one with the beam is walking and he stops in the middle of the Rishus Rabim, and that's why the one with the barrel bumped into him and it broke. Then chayiv. Then the balkaire is going to be chayiv to pay for the barrel that broke. Says the Gemara, what's the case over here? Why did he stop in the middle of Rishus Rabim? My love, don't you think the case over here is shomad lekatev? Even in the middle of the Rishus Rabim, sometimes a person stops to adjust the beam on his shoulder. It's heavy and he wants to adjust it, and that's a normal thing. The orchehu, it's normal for a person to stop. But still, even though he's not doing something abnormal in his behavior, walking in the Rishus Rabim, the Katani Chayiv, he's still going to be responsible for the damage of the barrel, the person behind him carrying the barrel. Why? Because even though you're doing something normal and stopping, but you should scream and say, well, I'm going to be stopping now. Be careful behind me. So he should have warned the other person, and that's why I'll be chayiv for it. So here you see that in a case where a person could warn, he has to warn, and therefore he's responsible for the damage that happened. This is a question of Yechanan that says that a person does not have that responsibility to warn. Answers the Gemara, loy. That's not the case over here, that he stopped in a normal fashion to adjust. Rather, k'sha'amad lafush, he stopped just to rest. He's taking a rest in the middle of the Rishus Harabim. And that's why he's going to be responsible, because this is not a place to take a rest. Says the Gemara, so then what does that mean? The only reason he's chayiv is because he stopped to take a rest. But if he only stopped just to adjust the beam on him, so what would be the halacha then? Potter. So in that case, it'll be potter. So it depends why he stopped. Tosfos here actually points out that there's a difference in stopping for just adjusting or stopping in order to rest, because if there's no actual visible difference between them, then the person behind him doesn't make a difference for him what the intention of the Bala Kaira ahead of him is stopping for. But Tosfos says when a person stops to rest, so then the other person does not have to be careful with this. He stops in a different kind of a way. He stops where he sort of, I guess, sits down or whatever it is. He stops in a way that this is something that is unusual and it's not his responsibility. But Omad Lekatev, which is he's not blocking the road as much. Tosfos brings from the Gemara later whether he's blocking the road or not. When it's Omad Lafush, he blocked the road more, and therefore it's going to be his responsibility. If he just stopped to adjust his package, he didn't block the way from him. So you can see the difference over here. It's not just a difference in the intention of why he stopped, but there's an actual real visible difference in these two ways of stopping in the middle of the street. Okay, but the Gemara now, let's go back into the Gemara. So the Gemara says, you're telling me that if this Bala Kaira, the person carrying the beam, it depends why he stopped. Did he stop to just to take a rest? That's abnormal in the middle of the Rishus Harabim, or he stopped to adjust? So if so, what does it say in the next part of this Mishnah here? Adatani Seif, the Mishnah afterwards says, if when the Bala Kaira stops, he tells the Bala Chavis behind him, stop, then he'll be potter for the damage that happened to the Bala Chavis because he warned him. So the question now is, if this Mishnah is looking to make a distinction regarding this person that stopped, lifloig v'lisni b'didah, it can make a difference regarding the case of the person that stopped without bringing in a new detail about him warning the other person or not warning the other person. It can make the distinction as follows. When are we going to say that Ichayiv, when you stop in the middle of Rishus Harabim, Kishamad Lafish? If you're stopping to rest, it's not the place in Rishus Harabim to stop to rest. But if you only stopped just to adjust the beam, then potter. This is normal, and therefore for this you're going to be potter. So why doesn't the Mishnah make this distinction here if it's true that it does depend why he stopped in the middle of the Rishus Harabim? Answers the Gemara. No, the Mishnah Dafka wants to make this point when you told the Bala Chavis to stop, because Kamashmalon, here the Mishnah wants to say another Chiddush here, a bigger Chiddush. That even though you stopped in the Rishus Harabim and you're resting, and it's not the place to stop. So you may think that now, regardless of what happened, even if you're going to warn the person behind you, you should still be chayiv for this because this is not the place to stop. Nevertheless, when you warn him and you tell him to stop, you're going to be potter. So the Mefarshim explained that maybe it's svara to say that if you stopped lafush in the middle of the Rishus Harabim, so the person behind you could just continue going because you're blocking him. So even if you warn him to stop, he can continue trying to make his way through, and if his barrel breaks, you'll still be responsible. So that's the chiddush of this Mishnah, that even though you stopped and you're resting in the middle of the Rishus Harabim, but if you warn the person behind you, you're going to be potter for the damage that you cause. Tashama, the Gemara brings another ayah again to this machlokes regarding whether it's a person's responsibility to warn or not. And if he doesn't warn, he would be chayiv for this. Hakadoren v'hazagogin. If you have potters that are walking in the Rishus Harabim, or zagogin, people that sell glass vessels, they're walking one behind the other in the Rishus Harabim. Niskal arishain. So the first one tripped. V'nafal, and he fell. V'niskal hasheni, and then the second one behind him tripped in the first person that fell there. And then Vashlishi B'Sheni, a third one tripped and fell on the second person. So what's the halacha here? Rishon Chayv B'Niskei Sheni, the one at the front, he's responsible for the damages of the one behind him, the second, and V'Sheni Chayv B'Niskei Shlishi. And the second one that fell is responsible for the damages that he causes for the third. Each one, the one that he damages behind him, he'll be responsible for that. If not only the second fell because he tripped on the first person, but also the third also fell because he tripped on the first person that was there. So then, Rishon Chayiv B'Niskei Kulam, they all tripped on him, so he's going to be Chayiv in all of the damages that happened for the second and for the third. If they warned one another, when the first one fell, he warned the one behind him, or the second warned the one behind him, the third, then Peturin, then they'll be Patur because they warned. So what's the case over here? When it says that they warned, my love, don't you think the case over here is that they fell and they didn't have a chance to get up, and still this Braisa here is saying that they have to warn, and if they don't warn, then they're going to be responsible. This is exactly like Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said. It's a question of Rabbi Yechanan that says that as soon as you fell and you couldn't yet get up yet, you're not expected to warn anybody. Says the Gemara, Loi, that's not the pshat of this Braisa. Rather, the case of here where it says that you have to warn, Shahaya len lamoi, they had a chance to get up. So if you had a chance to get up and you're not getting up, then you're going to have to warn. Aval, says the Gemara, so what does this mean? Lehaya len lamoi, they didn't have a chance to get up yet. So then what's going to be the din? Patur. Since you just fell, you don't have a chance to get up, so no matter what, you're going to be Patur. So if so, we have over here a new distinction. In the Braisa, it says, again, so now it comes out as follows, that it depends if you're able to get up or you weren't yet able to get up. Says the Gemara, so if so, ihachi, the tani seife. So what's the distinction that the Braisa said? That it depends if you warned them or not. That if you warned them, so then you're going to be Patur, but if not, you're going to be Chayiv. Why does it make that distinction? Why is the Mishnah bringing up a new thing about whether he warned them or not? So then you'll be Patur. If you did warn him, listen to Bidida. The Braisa could make a distinction when a person falls, is responsible for the damages of the person behind him, without bringing in a new subject about warning. You could just make a distinction regarding this person that now fell and say as follows: when are you responsible if you were able to get up and you didn't move out of the way? If you couldn't get up yet, you just fell, then Peturin, then you'd be Patur. Why is the Braisa bringing up an additional detail here? You can make a distinction regarding the falling itself. And to the Gemara, no, this Braisa wants to tell you a chiddush. Even though you should have got up, so now you're lying extra time, you're resting there in the Rishus Harabim, and it's not a place to stay there. So you would think that in such a case, no matter what, you should be chayav for whatever damages you cause. Nevertheless, if the first warned the second or the second warned the third, peturin, they'll still be patur. Okay, now the Gemara comes back to explain more in detail what it said here in this Braisa regarding the first that damaged the second that damaged the third, that each one will be chayav for the other's damage. What was the cause? What damaged? And what got damaged? Gemara will discuss all of this. Amar Rave, so Rave says about this Braisa. Rishon chayiv b'niskei sheni, bein b'niskei gufay, bein b'niskei memaynai. The first one that damaged the one behind him, so he's responsible whether it's his body that damaged the person behind him. In other words, the person behind him stumbled upon his body and got injured or damaged. Or bein b'niskei memaynai, or whether the possessions, the vessels that he had with him were lying there in the ground, and that's what damaged the person behind him. Doesn't make a difference what caused the damage. Either way, he'll be responsible for this. However, Sheni, the second person, the one behind him, Chayiv b'niskei shlishi b'niskei gufay, he is going to be responsible for the fact that his body causes damage to the person behind him, to the third person. But the possessions of his that are lying now there in the Rishus Harabim that cause damage to the person behind him, for that, he's not going to be Chayiv. So the Gemara explains this. What's Rav saying? Why should we make such a distinction? How are you going to explain what we consider a person that trips and falls into the Rishus Harabim? However you consider this to be, as the Gemara here will explain, it's not understood why we're making this kind of a distinction. If we're going to say that when a person trips in the Shusarabim, so it's negligence. So therefore the first one tripped, the second one tripped, and this is considered to be negligence by both of them. So if so, Sheni Nami L'chayev. So just like the first one, you said that if he trips and now he's lying there himself and he has also memoina, he has kalim with him and things that damage the other person behind him. So just like the first person, because he tripped and it's considered to be a pshia, so he's chayav for whatever he damaged with the other person, the same thing should be with the second one. Whether he damaged with his body, whether his kalim that are there that fell damaged the other person, should also be chayav for that, because niskal peshaya, this is all your negligence. And if you're going to say that when a person trips under the Shusarabim, so this is not his negligence, it's an einus, like the opinion brought here before in the beginning. If so, so then the first one that fell and tripped, he should be potter. He should be potter whether it's his body that damaged the other person. He should be potter whether his mamain, his possessions that are there that fell, that damaged the other person. It's all an einus. So why are we saying that by the Rishon Yechayev? Okay, so the Gemara answers and explains what Rava meant as follows. Rishayin vade pishayu. The first one that trips, so miskal, he tripped, he's a pishaya. That's negligence on his part. And therefore, he's going to be responsible for whatever damages his body causes and whatever damages his possessions that are there that cause another person to trip on it. He'll be chayav for all of that. Pishaya. His body that damages someone else, he's Adam HaMazik. It's him himself that he's being mazik. His possessions that are there are a bayr and the Rishus Harabim that he's responsible for, was negligence that it's there. And therefore he's going to be chayiv for that. For whatever you chayiv in bayr. By bayr you're not chayiv everything. By your Adam HaMazik you're chayiv everything. Bayr, we know that you're not chayiv if it damages kalim and so on. That's the first person. He's for sure pisheya when he trips and stumbles. Sheni, however, when it comes to the second person, when he trips on the first person out of him, he's not a pisheya when he trips. Once the first person tripped before him and you trip on him, so then that's not a pshia. So therefore, agufai mechayev. So, but if you damage the person behind you, in other words, the second person now that tripped there, damages the third person, so if you damage with your own body, for that you still will be chayev. Why will you be chayev? Even though the second person, it's not considered to be a pshia. Because the case over here is that you waited there. You could have gotten up, moved out of the way, you didn't. So you're going to be chayav for staying there. Potter, but even though you could have moved away things and you didn't, so for your money that you left there, you're going to still be potter for this. Why are you potter? Now the money, in other words, his possessions that he leaves there, that's a bird that you left there. You could have moved it away. Why would you be potter for this? The answer is the Omalei, because the second person says to the third person, Hi Bira, this pit, in other words, my possessions that are here that create this stumbling block, this pit in the Rishus Harabim, lava no kerite. I didn't dig this pit. When I fell and my possessions fell with me here, it was dug by, it was caused by the first person that fell ahead of me, and the second person that trips is not a pisheya, so therefore I didn't dig this. Now, the fact that he left it there after it fell and he could have moved it away, so Rashi says, no, if this person picks himself up and goes away, and even if he would leave his possessions there, he would be potter for this, and that is because he's mafkirit. And if he's mafkirit, this Brais over here holds that if a person that's mafkir, his possessions that it fell there and it fell ba'inus there, and he's mafkir it, so then you're not responsible for that. As we had this already in the Gemara before, that after an einus occurred and a person's possessions fell under the Rishus Harabim, and he's mafkir it and leaves it there and walks away, then he'll be potter for it. And that's why over here, the second person, when he's mazik, when his mamain that he left there is mazik the third person, for that he'll be potter. Meisvei, but the Gemara asks, on this pshat of Rav in the Braisa. There's another Braisa that says regarding this case, Kulon chayavin al niske gufan upeturan al niske memainam. All of these, the first, second, and third, the halacha over here is the first and the second, actually. The first and the second are the ones that are damaging. All of them are chayiv al niske gufan. They're chayiv if they damage with their body, and upeturan al niske memainam. But they're potter if their possessions lying there in the Rishus Harabim damage another person behind them. So what do we see from here? My love, it says kulon. This is the halacha forever for all, the first and the second. My love, afil rishain. That means even the first, he's not going to be responsible for the damages that happens with his possessions that are there. So this is a question on Rava. The pshat that we just said, according to Rava, is that the first is responsible for whatever damage he causes. Because the first, when he stumbles and falls, niskal pisheya. He is a pisheya for falling, so whatever damages he causes will be chayiv. But over here, this brayso is saying that no, even the first is not responsible for the damages that his possessions cause here. Says the Gemara, loy. That's not how you have to understand this brayso here. Lebar mirishayin. When it says that all are chayiv, it means all, but not the first. Not the first. Or the second one will be chayiv for only if his body damages and not the kalim, as the Gemara just explained before, but not the first. In fact, the Gemara, how could you say this? But kulam ketani, it says kulam, all. There's only two over here that are chayiv. It's the first and the second. So what does kulam include if not the first and the second? Amar Ravada Baravis, or Ravada Baravis says, kulan hanizakin. When it says here kulan, it means all of them that got damaged. Those are the ones that are going to be chayiv if they are damaging with the kalim. All of them are going to be chayiv, as the brayso says, if they damage with their body, that is, and pot if they damage with the kalim. But so the kulam refers to the ones that got damaged. So that excludes the first. The first one over here did not get damaged. So kulam would go on the second. Let's say if the third then damaged the fourth. So whoever then later got damaged, and he also causes damage to someone else. So over there we say that the halacha is going to be that they're chayiv if they damage with their body and not with their kalim, as was explained before. Because the second, third, and fourth, by them we don't say niskal pesheya, because they tripped after someone else ahead of them that tripped. So now they're not a pshia for tripping, because they tripped on someone else that already tripped in front of them. The first one though, he's a pesheya, he's going to be chayiv for everything. Like the explanation we said before, so we could say this in the brayso here as well. But the Gemara doesn't accept this pshat. The Gemara says, "Hi, mai. How could you read this pshat in the brayso? If you're going to say the pshat in the brayso when it says kulon, that we say regarding all that fell here, that they're chayiv only for the nezek of the body that their body caused, and not the niskim emayinam. So it includes even the first. Kulon. That's why it says here kulon. Goes on all of them. My kulon. But if you're going to say that this excludes the first one, why does it just simply say kulon? Lisni hanizakin. The answer that you just said, that when it says kulon, it doesn't really mean kulon. It means kulon beginning from the second. The second, which is getting damaged, but not the first, because he's just damaging someone else, but he's not getting damaged. But let the brayso clearly say that kulon hanizakin. Why doesn't it say that? So therefore now the Gemara, because of the question of this brayso, wants to suggest to say that what Rava really said was something else. This statement of Rava that we are discussing here now, where Rava is making a distinction between niskei gufai and niskei memainai, Rava is not talking about a distinction regarding what causes the damage, whether the body of the person that fell is causing the damage, or his possessions that are lying there in the Rishus HaRabim are causing the damage. Rav is talking about something else. Let's see. Elam Rava. So Rava says as follows. Rishon chayiv. The first one is going to be chayiv. What did he mean by this? What are we talking about over here? The Rishon is chayiv. Bein beniske gufay desheni. Bein beniske memayne desheni. What Rav is saying is the first one that fell. So if he damages the second person, so over here, what Rava was saying is whether he damaged the second person's body, or whether he damaged the second person's kalim, either way, he's going to be chayiv for this. Okay, so now, what Gemara means to say here, according to Rava, is as follows. The first pshat we had before, according to Rava, is that there's a difference between the first and the other ones behind him that tripped. Why? The first one that tripped, he's a pisheya, niskal pisheya. He's the first one that tripped. The other ones behind him, no, they're not a pshia, because they already tripped on someone else ahead of them. It wasn't their fault. But now the Gemara is saying no. Rava really holds niskal lav pesheya. So anybody that trips, including the first person, when he trips and falls, it's all an einus. So therefore, really he should not be responsible if any of his possessions damages the other person behind him, because the fact that his possessions are lying there on the floor, they fell and it was an einus. Rather, what is Rava saying? That the Rishon that's chayiv, what Rava was saying over here is the Rishon is chayiv for his body that damaged the other person. Because as the Gemara already explained before, for your own body, even though when you tripped and fell, even if that's considered to be an einus, but then you're able to move out of the way. You didn't move out of the way. So again, let's read again what the Gemara is saying. Rishon chayev, the Rishon, if he damages with his body that he could have moved out of the way and he didn't, so for that is going to be chayev, bein beniske gufay desheni, whether your body that you stayed there, you damaged the second person behind you, you damaged his body, and bein beniske memainai, whether you with your body by staying there damaged the other person's money, because you're an adam mazik, so you're responsible regardless of what you're mazik by the other person. Okay, so this is all on regarding your body, the damages. But the kalim that you left there, your money, your possessions that you left there, and you could have moved out of the way. So again, the Gemara already explained that before, that for that you're not chayiv, because since it was an oinus when you fell, because now the Gemara holds that niskal is not a pisheya, so the possessions of yours that you leave there, you're mafka them, and you're not responsible for any damages that they cause. Okay, but this is all regarding the first person. When he damages the second person behind him, he's responsible for anything that he damages of the other person behind him, because he could have moved his body out of the way and he didn't. But when it comes to this second person, Visheni comes to the second person, Chayev beniske shlishi beniske gufay avaloi beniske guf b'mainai. The second person, when he damages with his body the person behind him, the third person, so he's only going to be chayiv if he damaged his body, and he's not going to be chayiv if he damages the money, the possessions of the other person behind him. What's the reason for this distinction? So Rashi explains, because the second person behind him is less responsible than the first person. Even though they both fell and tripped, but nevertheless, the first person is always more responsible for this that he tripped over here. Okay, so the fact that the first person is staying over here and he didn't move away, he's going to be more responsible for this. The second person behind him, the fact that he trips and then he doesn't get up, he doesn't have the same level of responsibility, because his falling and tripping here was caused by the first person. And therefore, says Rashi, the second person that trips, we don't consider the fact that he's lying here and causes a damage to the second person behind him to be a damage of Adam Hamazik, that he's the one that's Mazik. Now, Adam Hamazik is responsible for everything. That we say regarding the first person. The first person that stayed there, he's responsible as the Adam HaMazik for any damages that happened to the person behind him. But the second person, no, he's only responsible for staying there like a bird which is being mazik. If it's only like a bird that's being mazik, so then a bird that's mazik, so you only chayiv for a person that got damaged through this, because that's the halacha by a bird that damages a person is chayiv. But for the kalim, if you damage kalim of another person, for that you're not chayiv, because by a bird we learn out from the pasuk that bird chamar v'lei kalim, or shor v'lei kalim. We learn out that for kalim you're going to be potter. So that's the distinction between the first and second person. This distinction the Gemara is trying to say here right now is not so easy to understand. Taisus actually points out that this teretz of the Gemara is a big doichik, because it's very hard to explain why we should say that the first person, when he falls down and he didn't move away, so he's an Adam HaMazik and he's responsible for all kinds of damages that he causes to the second person. But the second person that's lying there, so he's not as responsible. So he's only like a boyer, he's not like a Adam HaMazik, so we downgrade him to being a boyer, and therefore he's not chayiv for everything. He's potter for kalim like a boyer, which is potter for kalim. But in the end of the day, the second person that's there is also a pisheya. He could also move out of the way. Why should we make this kind of distinction? So Taisus says this answer of the Gemara is really a very big deichik. The Gemara is going to anyways refute this answer, and therefore the Gemara doesn't question the reasoning of this answer itself. Okay, so the Gemara explains. Let's see in the words of the Gemara. Again, when it comes to the Sheni, he's chayiv beniske shlishi, beniske gufay. He's only responsible for causing damage to the body of the other person. Avaloi beniske memainai. But he's not going to be responsible for the niske memainai that he causes the other person. My time, the havalei bar. The second person, we consider him to be like a bar. V'loi matzinu bar shechayiv b'yis hakelim. And if the second person that's there, because he has less responsibility, we don't consider him to be like a Adam HaMazik, he's just like a bird that's mazik, so bird is not chayav for being mazik kalim. So if he's mazik the third person, he's going to be potter for that. Okay, so this pshat over here fits with what it said in the Braise, that when it says kulan chayavin al niske gufan. So what this means is that everybody is chayiv for the only the guf that damages is chayiv for the damages of the guf of the second person. But If it's your possessions that damage, for that you're going to be potter, as I mentioned, because right now the Gemara is saying that Rava holds that niskal lav pesheya. So therefore, the fact that your possessions stay there, for that you're not chayiv. Because if niskal lav pesheya, so it's an einus that your possessions are there, and if you just leave them there and you mafka them there, for that you're not responsible. You're only responsible for the damage that you cause with the fact that you yourself stay there. So therefore, it fits with what the Braisa said, which is what this was the whole question the Gemara asked. The Braisa says, Kulam, by all of them, Chayavin al Niske Gufan and Puturin al Niske Memainam, because again, Niska Lav Pesheya. So therefore, you're not responsible for your possessions that were left there. Okay, but the Gemara now asks on this Pshat, Hanichel Shmuel da Omar, this is all a good answer, according to Shmuel, that says, so again, the Gemara here was saying that the second person, we don't consider him to be a Adam Mazik, we consider him to be like a bird that was Mazik. Says the Gemara, to consider this person, a human body, that he could be like a bird that's Mazik. And therefore, there's a distinction whether he was Mazik someone else's guf, in our case, the third person's guf, or he was Mazik his Kalim. So Anichel Shmuel, this distinction is all true, could be true according to Shmuel. The Omar, Shmuel says, Kol takala bayrhu. Anytime there's a stumbling block in a Shus Rabim, whether you mafkir it, whether you own it, either way, this is all learned out from Bayr. So here as well, we can say that the person's body himself, the second person here, his body is considered to be like a Bayr. But Rav says that the whole halacha of Bayr is only if it's something which is hefker. But if you were mafkir it, so then it's not considered to be a Bayr. Your possession that's mafkir, that's mazik, that is someone else, and you still own that possession of yours, even if it's left in the Rishus Harabim, that's not Bayr, that's shayr. So we can't make this distinction here and say that the second person that damaged the third is only chayav for damaging his guf and not for damaging his mama and his kalim, because you're like a Bayr. Not according to Rav. According to Rav, you're not like a Bayr. So how are we going to learn over here the pshat and what Rav said? This answer doesn't fit. Therefore, the Gemara goes back to the original understanding of what Rav said. So that we go back to our original pshat, that when Rav said that we're talking about by the Rishon, Niske Gufay, Niske Memoinai, that is responsible for both, and by Sheni, the Sheni is not chayiv for Niske Memoinai. So what was the original pshat? That Rav holds Niskal, a person that trips, is a Pesheya. However, there's a difference between the first and the second. The first person, when he trips, he's a Pesheya, so therefore he's chayiv, whether his guf causes damage, or whether his mama and his possessions there cause damage, because he was a Pshia by his falling there. And the second person is not a Pesheya, so he's chayiv only for Niske Gufay, and not for Niske Memoinai. For Niske Gufay is chayiv for leaving it there, but for Niske Memoinai that he left there, for that you're not chayiv. So we're going back to the original pshat. You had a question on what it said in the Mishnah, or the Braisa rather, that it says Kulan Chayavin al Niske Gufan Paturin al Niske Memayna. Why is it saying that you only chayiv, and everybody, that includes even the first person, you only chayiv al Niske Gufan and you pat al Niske Memayna? Says the Gemara, Tirgema Ravada Bar Minyaimi Kamed Raviner. So he explained what that Braisa means to say is Shohusku Kalim Bekalim. The Patur that Braisa is talking about over there, when it says Paturin al Niske Memayna, what it's saying is if the Kalim, if the possessions of the first person were mazik the Kalim, the possessions of the second person, so then even by the Rishon, you'll also be patur for that, because this is Bar that's being mazik, and by Bar that's mazik, it's always patur if it's mazik Kalim. So true, what Rav says remains true, that the first person is chayev whether his guf damaged, or whether the possessions that fell there damaged because niska pesheya, so he's responsible whatever causes damage. However, the possessions of his that are there that damage are a bayr. So for that, you only chayiv in the framework of bayr, which excludes kalim. If you damage the other person's kalim, the second person's kalim, for that you'll be pater. And that's what the Braisa meant when it said Peturin al Niske Memaynon. It just meant to say that you're pater if you damage the kalim of the second person, like the halacha of Bayr always is. So it fits with what Rav said. Now the Gemara goes back to another detail that it said in this Braisa that we quoted before about the potters that were walking, the three potters, or the three people that are selling glassware, and they were walking one behind the other. So Omar, the Braisa, they said the machmas rishon naflu, if not only the second, but also the third, they all tripped because of the first person that tripped. So then Rishon chayiv b'niskei kulam. So it's going to be the first one that's going to be responsible for all the damages, not only for the damages of the second, but the damages of the third as well. So the Gemara asks, Machmas Rishayin heichi nofel. How did this happen that they all trip because of the first person? If the second person is behind the first, and now the third is behind the second, so then how is the third tripping because of the second? So the Gemara explains what happened over here is Rav Papa says the case over here is the paskel orche kishelda, that the whole road, the first person that tripped and fell, he blocked the entire road like a dead carcass that's lying in the width of the entire road and nobody could go through. And therefore, what happened over here is that the second person tripped on this and the third person tried to go around and get through and he couldn't, and he tripped on the first person as well. Rav Zvid says, Kechutre de samyusa, that the first person fell like the stick of a blind person that he uses for himself to see his way, and sometimes he goes in the whole width of the Rishus Harabim to feel out his way where to go. So over here, Chutre de samyusa means also the same idea. According to Rashi, Rav Zvid is saying the same point as Rav Papa, that the first person fell in the whole width of the Rishus Harabim, so therefore the second and the third person going behind him both fell and tripped on the first person, and therefore he's going to be chayav for both of them.